let me just do a quick introduction as to who I am and what my career background has been, and then we can kind of just jump into questions. So I initially started off in the financial services industry. I was working for an investment management company in the private equity space. So we're a private equity fund of funds. We invested in buyout and venture capital funds. So I did a lot of investment analysis. Realized that wasn't quite for me, and I wanted to go into working for an operational company. And I landed at Salesforce, actually in their financial planning and analysis group. So again, still kind of similar to that finance thread. Realized that finance in general just wasn't quite the right fit for me. And I decided that because I really like solving problems, product management seemed to be kind of a natural fit with that based on what I've learned from other folks who are in product management. But what I didn't realize is that there's actually a couple different areas of product management. There's product management in the sense of on the tech and product R&D side, where you're actually developing the product that goes out to a customer. That's the company you work for sells to actual customers. Then there's internal product management, where you are either deploying the products that your company provides to customers internally, or managing other companies' products internally from the IT organization, which is where I am. So let's see, wow, it's about 4 years now that I've been on the product management side, switching from finance and strategy at Salesforce to our data warehouse business intelligence team at Salesforce. And it wasn't quite the most natural transition, but it was a really interesting one. And I'm happy to talk more about that if you guys want to know more about that story. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell. Aside from that, I like to cook a lot and snowboard. So that's who I am. I guess since this is an Ask Me Anything session, I don't want to just blab about my life story. So what kind of questions do you guys have? Yeah, in the back. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you in the front who might not have heard so clearly, the question was, how important is it to have a technical background going into product management? That's the question. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. So my experience has been a little different. I went into supporting our data warehouse team. And how I was able to make that transition is I actually acted as a business subject matter expert while I was on the finance side. So I actually got to work really closely with our development team. Our development team, they use Informatica to create the code on our database, and we run an Oracle database currently at Salesforce. And so I got that exposure to what SQL looks like. How to think through a piece of Informatica code, how the database overall is structured at Salesforce, and I got that exposure that way. So that is a way to kind of circumvent having the prior technical experience, is having a project to be able to work on so that you get exposure that way. If you are making a blind jump from company to company, it is recommended to have some sort of technical experience, whether you take a class in whatever language it is that you want to, for the product that you're most interested in. So if you're looking for a company that their product is based in Java, yeah, I would highly recommend taking a Java course. Or if the company you're looking at runs on Python, definitely, like by all means, it's important to understand the structure of Python. Not that you should expect to be writing code in Python or Java or whatever language it is, but you should at least understand how the language is structured, because that will allow you to make smarter decisions on how to guide the growth of the product, and also gives you some credibility with your development team as well. Okay. Yeah, question here.
Curious to know, what is a product manager? How is a product manager judged when it comes to once you ship the product? What are the metrics that are used to see if you've done a good job? And if so, who do you also report to? Just to get an idea of the hierarchy of how it works.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, how do you measure success as a product manager? Again, it's a little different being a product manager in the IT industry versus on the tech and product side. I do know a little bit, at least on the tech and product side, and I do know how I'm measured on the IT side. So I'll speak first to what my experience is. On the IT side, we work in projects. So for the projects, we work with a particular business group. So for example, last year I worked with our renewals organization, and we were working on a pretty large scale project where there were various deliverables we had to meet. One was they wanted to have a set of dashboards that the renewals managers were going to use to help understand the upcoming renewals that they had to focus on, and if there were situations where there were clawback opportunities, they wanted to keep track of that. Attrition that had already occurred, and potential attrition that would potentially occur in the future. So those were key elements that they wanted to know, be able to have a single point of view to keep track of what's going on in their world instead of having to look through 10 different tabs to find this information. That was one element of it. So measures of success there was obviously usage. And some of it is less reportable. It's time that folks felt that they had time savings, and that's not as easy to report. We had to do kind of some pulse checks quarterly to get a sense of what benefit we brought to the organization, to the renewals organization. Additionally to that, something that we did work on that was reportable is that we actually automated this process for clawbacks. What we call it is renewals operations requests. So these are situations where an attrition happened, but then on a particular product, but then within a certain time frame, I think it was 3 months, within the 3-month time frame, the same product was sold. So in this situation, the renewals manager gets dinged, but the AE gets compensated. And so those scenarios, there's particular rules based on the data that can be used to identify when a situation like that occurs, and when it is occurring, to flag that and actually to be able to recompensate the renewal manager. That process, there was a team of, I think it was about like 12 people or so, spending a cumulative of, I think it was like 200 hours a month, just digging through all this data. So the process that we automated helps reduce that amount of time significantly. And we call it back to like millions of dollars within just the first couple of runs of it. On the tech and product side, some of what I've learned from folks I know on our own tech and product teams and other tech and product teams it is also very much usage. So measures of success there is to know how all of this is also logged too. And all companies have some sort of app log where you actually track a customer's usage of product, a particular feature in the product, how much time is spent, if they actually followed, for a feature that has a clear start to finish, if they actually followed through or abandoned it midway. And so those are metrics that can help paint a picture of what's happening with the product. And then actually going back and you can't answer all the questions with just data. So you do have to have sessions with your customers too to understand what is the gap with a particular feature. Is it a useful feature, or does it need to kind of change shape in order for it to become useful? So it's a mixture of metrics to indicate where there's a problem, and then provides an opportunity to dig in further to know where the product what direction should it go into. But when it's a scenario where it's a feature where you kind of change the shape of it, you can definitely track metrics from the before and the after of that change and see how the usage has improved over time. Okay, sure. Yeah, right here.
So what are the skill sets or maybe the gaps which probably a person coming from a technical background would need to get into product management? I guess it's a question exactly opposite to what the first question
Sure.
And also, just to follow up on that, is it easier for a person to make the transition into product management from a software role within their company or externally?
Okay, so two-part question. One part was, if you are a technical person, what kind of skills are important to focus on to become a successful product manager, and making that transition is easier to do within your existing company or making a jump externally. Okay. So from that perspective, I have actually worked with folks on my team who have transitioned from a more technical database developer role to taking on a more functional role. And usually that transition happens with with the BSA, business system analyst type role, and then into a product owner, product manager role. But either way, the key skills, I would say, from my experience and from observing others, is it's really qualitative. So interpersonal skills, I know that's a pretty broad category of skills. They're really important. The ability to communicate, and the ability to ask questions, the ability to answer questions, the ability to know what questions people want to ask but are not actually asking directly. So an example, I will give a good example. So just the other day, I actually got a question from our customer intelligence team. He sent me a query and said, this trigger type generates these values, A, I, R, and U. Can you tell me if our analysis is right? Like, okay, I guess I could run that same query and tell you if I got the same results. But based on that email, I know that there's something else you want to know. So this trigger type is based on some workflow rules. So what is it that you want to understand about workflow rules? How is that going to impact your business or your delivery, which in this situation, they deliver an early warning system that takes a bunch of data, helps us understand where an account is at risk of attrition. So just knowing who your audience is, knowing how they kind of communicate their needs, and being able to get down to the underlying goal is the most important. So folks also will try to solution for you. So they'll throw solutions at you, not actually the problem. And the ability to see through that is going to make you a really successful product owner. And then I also cannot stress enough the value of working on a team too, and knowing how to foster that type of team mentality. I've seen teams where personalities are very much independent, and it's kind of like the handoff is, when I'm done with my work, it's your turn now, and I don't care what you do. That's not helpful. And when you are a product manager that's able to kind of get folks to work together and really care about the work of each other, that's when you have a successful team as well. And for the other question about making the transition, I would say it is easiest to make such a big jump within the company. For myself, I don't know that I would have been able to make that transition if I didn't do it within Salesforce. Reason for that is, I guess it depends. If you do have the technical expertise, then it might be a little bit different for you. But for me, I didn't. I have a degree in business. I worked in finance. So I didn't have direct experience aside from being a subject matter expert on a project showing that I had the ability to think technically. So making that transition is a lot easier because then at least you've had experience working with people internally who know your work ethic, who know that you can handle a challenge, who know how you interact with other people, and know your ability to problem solve. So from that perspective, I think it is easier to make the transition within your company before making that transition out. Okay, and then, sure. You have a question too? Oh, yeah.
So I work at a startup where we struggle to hit deadlines in terms of software development, and wondered if you had any sort of best practices for that, and also who should be sort of driving the estimates.
Yeah, I do. So the question is around, it's a scenario where development teams missing kind of deliverables and timelines, and how do we address that?
Or in particular, the deadlines just being wrong in the first place.
Yeah. How do we get the right deadline? Yeah. So I've experienced that as well when I first transitioned into product management. There wasn't a lot of structure around how we intake work and estimate the level of effort, and also project timelines. And so with the right management in place, we were able to set those expectations too. So refining the way that you intake work is important because it allows you to have a focused scope. I know sometimes when you're in startup phase, it can be a little hard because things change so rapidly. But when you are able to have a good sense of scope, then that doesn't change too drastically. Then you're able to better estimate the level of effort it takes to deliver said scope. Also, too, if you are in a team where you're working with some sort of analyst, they can actually break down what that scope means in terms of kind of more technical requirements, and that just makes it easier to provide more realistic estimates. The key here, though, is that estimates should involve input from everyone who's going to deliver. So sometimes product managers provide the timeframes, and I think that's important from a communication standpoint, but I don't think a product manager should just come up with that delivery timeframe without input from other folks. The way we do it on my team is actually our delivery managers, who are the folks that actually are in charge of the developers. They work with our lead designer to come up with that estimate after our analyst does their work in terms of documenting functional and non-functional requirements. So we have a very clear idea as what the goal is that we're trying to achieve, what are all the steps where are all the components that need to be developed, a clear understanding of how we're going to develop it, and then from there we get a time frame delivered from our technical team, the people who are actually doing the work. And then that gets communicated back to the product owner, and I communicate out to our business stakeholders internally. If you're on a tech and product team, then through product or marketing to communicate out to the customers on what's to expect in the next release. So, okay, cool. Yeah, question over here.
I was curious if there was a case where you would overcome an obstacle created with your design team and you could share that with us.
A situation where I encountered
an obstacle or difficulty with the design team and you could share that with us.
Okay. Let me think back to a more complex one. For the scenario that I talked about earlier, for the renewal operations request, that one was really complex because it involved a lot of business roles. And also coordination with another team too. So it's two IT teams to deliver it with a business team that, because they were running a manual process, it was challenging to get all of the requirements documented too, because some of it was kind of just waving their finger around. It wasn't quite something that we could code at first. So things that we had to consider too, because it was so complex. I forgot how many objects that we were pulling. These are all Salesforce objects as our source system with business logic sitting on top of that. And we did have to work with our architect too. So from a design perspective, our architect is a really great resource because his sole job is to make sure that whatever we're delivering on our data warehouse platform is adhering to the best possible data warehouse standards. So it did take an iteration or two because we did actually encounter a situation where a key business requirement was communicated incorrectly to us. And so that's never a good feeling. But at the end of the day too, we are one team delivering together. So we kind of just had to move forward, adjust the scope, or not adjust the scope, but adjust the logic developed. So it wasn't quite that terrible of a situation. It wasn't too hard to overcome, but just the idea of making sure you're bringing in the right people to get the right experience to move the project forward was what helped us in the situation. Question here first.
How do you negotiate with the engineering?
Uh-huh.
Like, let's say they do have feature, like you want new features, they have a technical debt to complete and to work on. How do you find a common ground, and how often do you need to keep pushing that, or they keep pushing that?
Okay, so the question is, yeah. Okay, so working through the dynamics of the functional team and the technical team in terms of agreeing upon a delivery date for a set of features, right? And what set of features we're going to deliver, yeah. Okay, so here the key is to understand first what is the priority. Whether you're working on the tech and product team or within an IT team, you have to understand who are your stakeholders. If there's going to be external customers, if a certain set of features is going to be extremely important and it's going to impact the top line for your company, having that understanding is important because and that will help in your communications to the technical team. Because it's not about, hey, I want this done and you're just going to do it. It's about what's best for our end users, our customers. For me, working on the data warehouse team, it's what's best for the group that we are serving. Because in the end, it's a service role. So making your customers happy is the number one priority, and knowing really what is going to help them is the important part. Because sometimes you'll get requests that are seemingly important, but upon digging further, maybe they could wait. Maybe they're actually not as important as one person thinks it is. So that's kind of the first step you have to focus on is thinking across the board, what is really the most important for your end users, your external customers or your internal customers. And that should be what drives the focus for that next release. And if there is a resource bandwidth constraint, then you have to come together to figure out, okay, like based on the folks that we have, the resources we have, what can we accomplish within a given time frame? If the time frame is the limiting factor. But if a delivery date is not a limiting factor, maybe we just push it out. So those things it's a conversation. It's not a push and pull between two teams, but rather building that relationship so that you come to the decision as a whole. And that helps a lot because then everyone's committed to that common time frame, that common commitment. Okay, sure. We'll get some questions on that side.
If you are to build products in areas that you are not familiar with the technology
Yeah.
and the industry, how do you get yourself to pick up new knowledge and how do you get yourself to be familiar with the new areas?
Okay. So the question is, when you're working with a new technology or product, how do you develop or grow your experience so that you are able to deliver in that space? Right? I'm actually experiencing that right now. So I decided I wanted a new challenge, and I'm picking up enterprise integrations. And that's something that it's another IT deliverable. And what you'll find is people are really helpful. So if just reach out to your network, whether it's within the company you work for or folks you know through your own personal networks, through your professional networks. Figure out who knows what you need to know, who can fill that gap for you. Take them out for coffee or take them for lunch and really get to pick their brains as to how that solution works. It's, I would say, a lot easier to learn that way because you get to bypass all of the information from that may not quite be relevant to you, because if you don't want to learn how to actually code in that new language, you just want to know kind of more conceptually how it works, that it's a great option to learn from someone who already can digest that information for you. But if you do need to pick up more of a technical experience, then having some sort of course doesn't really replace. You need to have that course. There's not really a way to kind of replace that knowledge otherwise. But that's how I go about it. From a product manager role, at least the type of role that I would be more interested in doesn't require me to code, because I feel like that's not where my skill sets are best utilized. There are developers there who are going to be way better at coding than I will ever be. So I feel like that's not the best use of my time to get too far into the details. Okay, cool. A question right here.
What does a typical workday look like I'm just curious because a lot of scenarios that you described earlier seem a little bit similar to what a business analyst or a product owner does in some of the teams or in some companies. So I'm just wondering, what really does a product manager do?
Yeah. Again, that will differ. A product manager does differ company by company. At some startups, a product manager expected to have more technical experience and to be able to guide the technical team more. From a bit larger company, it's a little bit less so. Product managers expected to be able to understand the concepts of what the customer is asking for, whether it's an internal customer or external customer. So it definitely varies day by day, but every day you're going to be talking to somebody. You're going to be leading some sort of meeting. You're going to need to get people who don't report to you to get to do the work that you are responsible to get done. So it's a lot of people interactions, whether it's with your technical team or with folks who are going to help you get key information that will help you deliver your product. So I couldn't map out for you on my calendar what it looks like. It's kind of all over the place sometimes. But when you are working on a project internally in IT, there's going to be some standard meetings where the product team across the board for a particular project will meet together. So I've been on projects where we have 5+ IT teams working on different aspects of a project, and we'll have to have these core team meetings to provide updates. But aside from that, it is you set your own schedule. Okay. So question in the way back over here.
Yeah, I have a question. So basically, product manager is a hybrid between project manager and data scientist, right? So I'm curious, in your role, are you more project manager of a particular project or more a data scientist? Looks like it's 80% project manager.
Yeah, that is a great question. So the question is, how much of your time is really spent towards responsibilities are more like project management versus data science-y type efforts? In my role, yes, it's more project management. And that's just the nature of delivering a project, what is the word I'm using? A product solution internally where the product is already developed. We're just implementing it. So yeah, from that standpoint, it is more coordination. If you're looking on the tech and product side, I would say it's still coordination, but a different level of it. And I would say that unless you're working on a data science solution delivery, it's probably not going to be much data science either, but it will be more analysis and design in terms of what is the UI UX of a feature going to look like. So there's those elements as well. And when you do work on the tech and product side, you do work with your product marketing team and your general marketing teams as well, because there's that element where you need to be able to explain to them how the solution works so that they can explain to customers and to AEs and all of that. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think there's some question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, kind of back to your transition from what you're doing for a product manager. When you look at like your resume or your skill set from before, is there anything you thought that resonated particularly well or was really useful when pitching yourself as a product manager?
Okay, so the question is around, based on my prior experience, was there something that actually I listed on my resume that was helpful in positioning myself for this role? When you're working internally, making the transition internally, it's a little different because the relationships you develop kind of speak for themselves, and people don't really look at your resume as much unless it's a really big jump too. So I guess I did have some relevant experience. I did work on an operations project while I was on the finance team, putting together this business objects universe in the role I was in when I was in finance, the FP&A team at Salesforce. So that really helped in terms of positioning because I had not only the domain experience from a finance perspective, because that's when I switched over to IT, I was supporting the finance world first. So that was helpful. And then the ability to lead a project implementation, which all these IT projects are basically, they're just projects. And so the ability to kind of coordinate multiple people, set and work together to set deadlines, make sure that deliverables were being met, communication out to executives was happening. That was all relevant skills to be a successful product manager in an IT function. Sure. Okay, question over there.
What part of a PM's job is maintaining culture in the team, the folks you're working with?
Okay, so the question is around culture and what role does a product manager play in that? I think it's a critical role. So as a project manager, you are leading a team of developers and other functional resources too, especially, and they don't actually report to you. So to be able to motivate folks to work really hard and work together to deliver a common goal, it really boils down to the relationships you have with these folks. And that's been really what has helped me find success in my role too, is I do spend the time to get to know each person on my team individually. Well, I've started to have folks in Hyderabad, and that's been a little tough to have one-on-one time with them. But I do try to make an effort to at least to interact with them and develop that type of relationship, because that really helps. And also too, by having these one-on-one interactions, you get to learn where there are issues, because sometimes people actually won't communicate when they're having problems. And it can come up later, especially if someone takes on a deliverable that they do have zero confidence that they'll be able to deliver. It's important to know that before the commitment's really been made, or at least as soon after that as possible, so you can manage expectations, because that will then have a trickle effect. And the closer you get to the time frame that you committed to and miss it, the worse that is. But if you can communicate early on that there is a shift, the folks that you work with and your customers will be less annoyed about it. So yes, definitely developing that relationship with your team is extremely important. Question over here.
Can you give examples of different products that product managers at Salesforce work on and how that changes as you go from product manager to senior product manager?
Okay. So I don't know as much about it on the tech and product side, but at least on the IT side, I can speak more to it. So we have our data warehouse business intelligence team. We have a team that does enterprise integration, so sending information from one system to another. Workforce data, for example, to be able to send that from your workforce management tool to, let's say, Salesforce, for example, Salesforce Contact Object. We do also have a team that does implementations of our sales and service cloud internally. We have a team that actually manages our biggest objects, so opportunity accounts. We also have a professional services object too. So all of those require teams to maintain and update those objects. Excuse me. What other teams do we have? I know I'm blanking on some. Oh, and we have our teams that manage the implementations of external software internally. So Hyperion, for example, we have a team that manages our Hyperion implementation, our Oracle financials. We use Workday internally at Salesforce. So we have IT teams that manage the implementations and upkeep of all of those systems as well. And in terms of the delineation between a more junior product manager and senior, is the amount of work that you actually are responsible for. So for my area, it would be more junior PO is responsible for me, like probably just one project to start with, and then maybe two, and then it grows from there. And the projects may be more simple or smaller in scale at first when you're in a more junior position. And the same goes for the the external product implementations internally. It would be maybe certain features a more junior person is responsible for, and maybe the less complex of those features. And then that just grows with the experience. I hope that was helpful. Okay. Question over here. Okay, my typical day at work. So it depends on where the projects are that I'm working on, but on any given day, I will have multiple daily stand-ups with my different Scrum teams. And that's where I get a download of all the work we've committed for a particular sprint. We work in kind of like a hybrid Agile methodology. So we have two sprints a month. They're about 2 weeks each. We have sprint planning at the beginning of each sprint. So we commit to a number of stories. All of those are tasked out across the different roles. And so we'll go through the stories and particularly focus on where there's roadblocks and any issues, and when there's handoffs from one person to another. Let's say that development is near done, so we have to make sure that QE is ready to go. And when QE and integration testing is done, then we have to make sure that validations is ready to go soon after that, and so on and so forth. So there's that element of it. And then there's element of intaking new requests too, because my responsibility as a product owner is to make sure my teams are always busy, and also working on the work that is in priority level in terms of impact to the business. So then that will require that I'm having meetings with our internal business stakeholders to understand that what is most important to them at any given time, and also to know what's coming too, so that we can prepare in advance. And especially if we are needing to add additional resources, there's always that time to get folks up to speed that we have to account for too. So it's a lot of people I'm just talking to every day. Okay, a question over here.
How much efforts and time do you put in towards the long-term roadmap of the product?
So how much time and effort do I put into the long-term roadmap of the product? So in my role, I don't work on developing a product, actually, because I am on the data warehouse side. So I work on projects that are that require the support of data warehouse as a service. And so I will work on projects and developing the roadmap of how we're going to achieve the scope that we have defined for a particular period of time, which would typically be about a year for a project. So the way that I do that is in collaboration with our resource managers. So we have resource managers for our business system analysts and also for our technical team. So kind of it's typically the three of us that work together to kind of break down the scope. We t-shirt size it because it's hard to really know exactly how big something's going to be when you're first starting, but getting a rough sense of that level of scope, and also being a little bit realistic too, with conservative with our estimates, because we don't want to commit to a level of scope that we have no confidence in delivering within that year time frame or year and a half time frame, whatever that is. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay. I mean, what do you really want to understand then?
My mental block that the company I work for,
Okay.
is a systems company.
Okay.
So the role of a product manager there might be completely different from what you do as a product manager. So
Could be, yeah. So what does the product manager at your company do?
So they tell engineers or the TPMs what features the customers need.
Okay.
And the TPMs decide what the deadline is going to be and what the timing looks like. But basically, the product manager is the one driving the design of the product or the features in the product. So.
Yeah, because in this situation, the product manager is actually is responsible for the system solution. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that is the difference between the type of product management I work in, which is on the IT side, the internal IT team side. So we actually don't don't change the design of the products that we work with. We actually implement those products internally. So I implement our data warehouse solution product internally. But we do have our tech, I call our tech and product or R&D teams, where they do change aspects of the actual product. And we do work with them because we do, I mean, for example, we implement Einstein Analytics internally. So we do have tie-ins with the Einstein Analytics tech and product team to understand what the roadmap is for that product, and to also regression tests as well, because as the product changes, things can break, because functionality changes and the platform can change. So we have to stay on top of that as well. So from that standpoint, yes, in tech and product, the product manager is responsible for the design. And I haven't worked in that space, so I can tell you about how I would do things differently. But from what I know from other folks, some of it requires research on their own, and but the research is always taking information from what other people know as well. And I hope that your product manager is also taking input from your internal team too, because there's a lot of value that can be learned from the folks that actually do the technical work. So if that's not happening, maybe that's something you can propose to change. Okay. Question, maybe in the way back, yeah. Yeah, you, yeah. Oh, in the suit? You wearing a suit? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You.
How often do you travel to meet with your client or your client side to resolve the problem? Or do you just do it over the phone?
Well, the great thing about Salesforce is it's headquartered in San Francisco, so I don't have to do a whole lot of travel. Sometimes, but we do have teams that are spread across the world. So there have been times I've had to travel to Chicago, for example, because we're kicking off a project, and we do workshops. So there is that element of everyone gets together in one place, and we do usually 3-day workshops to actually define what it is that we want to see developed in my situation, since I'm in IT, in the project, to define that clear vision of what we expect to be able to accomplish within that year and a half time frame. So it's not super often that we have to travel, but we do have folks that, Salesforce is a really big company now, so we have teams for everything. But we do have operations team within the different functions. For customer success, we do have an operations team that does travel because customer success exists across the entire world. So it's important to get an understanding of what are the needs for folks across the entire world, to get a full picture of what are the most burning needs that are going to make our customer success group more effective, run different processes more efficiently, where are their biggest pain points, and then focus our energies on of those pain points, what's going to drive the most money for the company, what's going to drive higher renewal rates, what's going to drive higher customer success happiness. And that's, so understanding kind of what, on an internal perspective, people are facing with what's going to actually help propel the company forward. That's how we make the decisions on where then we spend our money to invest internally. Cool. And then I think right in front of you, the gentleman had a question. Yeah.
Do you ever pick people on your teams, or you just kind of work with individuals?
So sometimes I get to pick people. And when you do develop relationships with your resource managers, they like to give you first dibs. So sometimes I get that opportunity to kind of hand select folks that I think would work really well on a particular project. I don't like to play favorites, but there are varying degrees of experience, and it is important to give junior resources the opportunity to learn and excel, because you can't expect to keep everyone on your team for forever. That's just not realistic. So sometimes, yeah, I do get to pick my resources, and I do definitely always interview my business system analysts, because that role ties in very closely with the product owner. So it's really important to pick someone that you feel has the right experience to be successful in the particular project, especially on the IT side, because it starts and ends with the BSA. If you have someone who's not the right fit, the project is not going to be successful. Yeah. And then a question over here. Yeah.
I have a question, because
my industry, which is totally different from
Yeah.
IT, it's luxury and fashion. And we have so many cases where having a designer mind, a creative mind, and a business mind together, partnership, has built successful brands. So I was wondering, instead of challenges, is there any example you have where having different backgrounds has been more beneficial than challenging?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think different backgrounds is always more beneficial because it brings different perspectives to the table. So you can think, and that's also why I don't allow myself to come up with timelines either, because I don't know everything. I don't know. I have, based on experience now, I have a sense of how long things take to develop. But there might be some problem or some roadblock or some platform situation that I'm not aware of. So having different perspectives is nice, because then you kind of can think of whatever your common goal is from all different angles, and be able to pick the best from everyone's ideas to come up with a more cohesive solution that is really going to address your business need. And in order for you to be successful, to kind of gather the inputs from all those different perspectives is to develop that relationship across the board, so that everyone actually feels comfortable sharing their ideas and feels like their ideas are really valuable. Because it really starts with that relationship building to be able to get the most out of your team that you're working with. Concrete examples of how we've leveraged different backgrounds. I mean, I kind of do this on a daily basis too with my team. So I'll have an idea of what I think the solutions should look like, and I'll share that. But I also ask everyone on my team, from the business system analyst to the developer to the QE, what they think. And I don't let them give the answer of, oh yeah, that sounds fine. I actually have them counter what I propose and pick apart my idea too. Because what I found too, working with, because I'm not a technical person, but what I found with working with technical people is sometimes the question that is asked is the only question that's answered. So being able to ask the question in a different, like a more open-ended question, really helps, because then you kind of get a layer deeper and get to understand like what your technical team is really thinking, because sometimes they can be a little hesitant to share. So, yeah. Question here?
You mentioned that you have like a hybrid agile method and product management.
Yeah.
I don't know, solution. Can you kind of share what aspect or skill sets within the agile methodology? Not that I know too much about it, but like, can you share where the dynamics of key skill sets, where the synergies?
Yeah. So yeah, I did mention that we have a hybrid. With pure agile, you work on smaller scope items that don't require a lot of documentation. So you kind of just constantly intake, constantly develop, churn out the deployments, and then you keep moving on. In terms of structure, it is pretty standard to have 2-week sprints from an agile perspective, because that keeps the flow going, so that you're not spending too much time working on certain items. And also helps keep the scope digestible. That's the key with Agile, is that the scope should be able to turn around within 2 weeks. If it's not, then it needs to be broken down. Otherwise, you might fall into what we call Waterfall. So that is requirement built on requirement built on requirement. And those two methodologies work in different scenarios. If you're having, let's say, a systems implementation, so you're going to change out your financial planning software for a new financial planning software, you'll probably want to do something more like Waterfall, because there's a lot of impact across the board. So the transition from one system to another is a big shift, not something to be overlooked, not something to be rushed. And so you'd want to do like clear requirements gathering, your change management strategy, thinking through training plans, all that. Both Agile, it's smaller scope work items. And so we're hybrid because for our projects, we break down a particular requirement. So for example, the dashboards that we're producing for for our renewals organization, we broke it down by the data sets first. And within the data sets, breaking each down to where does the source come from, or the source objects coming from that are going to populate each of those data sets, and building that pipeline. And so for a particular sprint, we might work on a couple source to ODS table stories. And then the next sprint, we'll work on ODS to a dimension or a fact table. And then from there, we'll generate the data set that actually gets populated into Einstein Analytics. But as soon as that portion is developed, then our Einstein Analytics developer can actually develop the dashboard. So we kind of break down the work so that digestible chunks are achieved within the 2-week sprint, but it is all a part of a bigger goal. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay.
Who does the breaking down of the stories? Who owns the backlog? And how do you know, right? You do need to understand the technical, how can you break down the story without understanding what would it take, how to wisely and break it down like in smaller chunks that it can be developed separately. How does that, and how do you know how to break it down?
Okay. So the questions around how do you know how to break down the work into those digestible chunks. So it is a team effort. In terms of ownership, the product owner should typically be the one to own the backlog and own the roadmap of future work that's yet to be accomplished.
So what's the position of your team? So you have a product manager and a product owner and a business analyst.
Product manager and product owner are synonymous, so they're one and the same. For the breakdown of the team, we have our product owner, product manager. We have our business system analyst, and this is specifically for a data warehouse team. And we also have a designer, a lead developer, and then, depending on the project, X number of developers and QE engineers. And that's our technical team.
And is design implemented before on the sprint, or the design markups is kind of done?
Design is, so in terms of the flow of work, so you have your initial intake to understand what, in my situation, it'd be like, what is this project all about? What is the real end goal? What is the real issue that this project is going to solve for whatever business group it is that we're supporting? And then once we have that defined, we'll break it down into logical requirements. So, for example, for the renewals organization, we had this big scope of work, and we had to break it down by particular dashboard that we're trying to support, or trying to build, and the different dashboards too, because it wasn't just one set. And then also this automation work that we did for the clawbacks. And then we have our business system analysts tackle each of those efforts, but try to keep it so that we maintain the focus. So have one business analyst work on an entire effort, a mini effort, whether it's supporting, this one set of dashboards, and work on those requirements from start to finish. So that person would then do the functional and non-functional requirements, meaning for this dashboard, what are the key elements that need to be shown? What kind of metrics need to be supported? What's the time frame, the horizon for the dashboard? Is it going to be 12 months looking forward, 12 months looking back, or a combination of, minus 1 year, plus 1 year? That sort of, that's what we consider as functional requirements.
So business analyst is responsible for breaking down the more general requirements.
Yeah, to get a sense of what is it that actually needs to be achieved. And then also from the non-functional side is, what's the refresh cadence? Do you want to have this, do you want to be able to access this table, the data set table in our other, we have a data discovery zone, like stuff like that. And then that gets then passed to our designer, and the designer and the business system analyst have multiple sessions so that there's a knowledge transfer of what the real requirements are to support the kind of like the high level goal. And then from there, the designer comes up with a technical design that actually outlines, okay, how many tables are going to be produced? How many ETLs are going to be produced? Do we have a new source system connection? and the steps involved there. And then the developers then will actually go in and tackle that. Not quite. Because all this work is spread across multiple sprints. It's not get accomplished within 2 weeks. That would be impossible. It's like so much work. But it gets, the way I organize it too. So the product manager thinks about, once we usually have we try to have development from a prior requirement happening while analysis from a different requirement is happening, while design from yet a different requirement is happening. So each person on your team is working on something at any given time, and they're not blocked by the predecessor. So yeah, we can have, usually we have 3 different efforts going on at the same time. Yeah, okay. But I know you've had a question. And then, yeah.
So speaking about dashboards,
yeah.
I'm moving from product applications to finance and product management. So when you talk about dashboards, can you give me an example of a typical dashboard? What are the different dashboards you can take as a product manager to those buckets?
Sure. So because we're so big now, a lot of our dashboards are around gaining insights into operations. So for the renewals organization, they want to know how to prioritize their time. And the way that they get to know that is it's based on dollar amount, really. So for a particular account that is generating a lot of revenue, they want to know if there are potential attrition concerns with that account. So the dashboard then would track our early warning system that intakes information from our app, mostly from our app logs and usage logs, that helps us identify whether there could be potential risks based on the patterns of usage. They'll also want to know what renewals are up for renewal so that they don't accidentally miss reaching out and then and don't renew on time, because that's bad for their metrics as well. And I also support our customer intelligence team that does generate the early warning system dashboard. And so we work with them because as our products evolve, there's more products to track. And then especially as we acquire more companies, more stuff to track. So working with them to capture that data and also make sense of it too, so that it is actually digestible and usable from understanding what to do with this information.
Do you demand those dashboards from different teams, or you're just given the information? Is it your unique?
Yeah. So these Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is it your responsibility to physically get this information pulled in from various teams or units you work with, or they just give it to you as part of it?
Yeah, so in terms of how do we actually develop the dashboards?
Yeah, the dashboards or make sure different phases and different things.
Well, my team would be responsible for developing the dashboard, or at least supporting the data that goes into the dashboard. We have some business groups that like to create their own dashboards, which is fine, but they need help supplying the data and getting it refreshed on a regular cadence, because other business teams can't do that. But each dashboard is, or at least the data need is coming from a business group that cares about this information. Does that help answer your question? Yeah. I have a question on the way back over there.
How do you take a conscious effort to build working relationships?
How do I make a conscious effort to build working relationships? For me, it's actually a part of my personality. I really care about other people. So it's a little bit natural for me to notice when someone's having a bad day, or remembering that it's their birthday, or remembering it's their kid's birthday, or asking about their vacation, stuff like that. So it's stuff that I actually care about, because I care about who I work with, and I want to build relationships with the people I work with, because I find the more that we like each other, the easier it is to work together. And the easier it is also to work through issues together. Because no matter how much you plan and how much analysis you do, there's always some aspect of the unknown. And it's no one's fault. It just happens. It's just life. So if you're able to build these strong working relationships with the people in your team, then it's easier to tackle when things go bad and then come out of it stronger. Yeah.
How about working with folks not from your own team?
Working with folks not from my own team, it's the same kind of thing too, where if you are working with another team, it's for a reason. And there is a common goal there as well. So it does take a little bit extra effort to build the relationship because you may not see them on a daily basis. And there may be pressure on the project that you're working on. But either way, it's still important to develop that foundation to know that you are all working together on this effort. It's not that if one team loses, the other team doesn't win. It's either you win together or you fail together. On the way back over again.
For the front question,
Sure.
when you get multiple project requests that actually come in, what 3 or 4 attributes do you hang on to that beside the actual dollar amount to actually say, okay, this is the first, second, and fourth actual dollar?
Okay, so the questions are on when you have multiple requests, how do you prioritize them? Beside that. Mm-hmm.
How do you prioritize that percentage of dollar amount?
Yeah. So in terms of prioritization, it depends on if you're supporting one business group versus multiple. So we do have a team that does backlog work, so they get requests from all business groups. And it can be a challenge to prioritize as well. And sometimes it is kind of like a first come, first serve basis. But some things do get prioritized above because there is like an impact to financials in some sense. So not that it's a cost perspective, but rather, will this cause us to miss earnings? Or will this cause us to miss reporting? And because we're a public company, those 2 aspects are extremely important. And also trust is extremely important to us as a company. So if there is some integrity that's going to cause the trust that customers have in us to decrease, then that also takes priority. But from a situation where you're supporting just one group and they have multiple requests, then the approach I like to take is to understand what is the time sensitivity for each of those requests. But before I actually get into the prioritization conversation, so understanding the time sensitivity and also making sure I understand the scope. And once I understand those 2 things, then I can kind of give a rough outline of when I think things can happen based on the complexity and the duration of when things are going to happen and match against whether or not we feel confident to meet whatever time frame, the desired time frame of the delivery. Yeah, okay.
Question right there. How long do you spend kind of scoping the actual ask?
Okay, so time spent scoping, it depends on how big of an ask it is. If it's, let's say, there's a few new fields that someone wants to add to a data set for a dashboard. That doesn't take very much time. If we have a business system analyst focus on it, probably at most 12 hours to have the meetings, do research, and document everything. So it's very quick turnaround for the analysis. Yeah. Right. So a new feature like that affects one of our biggest products, our Sales Cloud. Yeah, so that would, I feel like I do know the answer to this. That would take, I think it could be up to a year from the concept inception to actually delivering. Because for Sales Cloud, or all of our Salesforce products, actually, there's 3 releases a year. And the code lockdown for one is during the prior release. So if we're going to release in the summer, then the code lockdown was in the winter, which means that requirements and all the development needs to happen by the prior fall. Yeah. Okay, hopefully that helped. Question right here.
Yeah, so do you purely take on requests from other teams on what to build, or do you have some creative say as to like what you're going to be building? So like something that you think might be helpful for all teams, but not necessarily as.
Yeah, so the questions are on what kind of creativity do you get to put into what your team works on? By working on projects, there is there's kind of like a guardrails around what you actually deliver. Everything that you deliver is going to be going towards that goal of the project. But we do, as an IT team, we are looked to provide the solution, not actually develop the solution provided to us. So we do have creativity as to how we want to achieve whatever is being asked of. And we do provide input too. Let's say if it's a dashboard that we're working on, based on other dashboards we've supported and based on what we know how our Einstein Analytics product is growing, we will make suggestions on how to better orient the look and feel of a dashboard. And then in terms of solution delivery, from a metric standpoint, we will recommend a different way to calculate a metric if it makes more sense from a logic perspective. Like, for example, we have a concept of bookings internally, and someone may come up with some logic and it sounds and feels like bookings, but they don't actually call it that. We'll actually propose to take that common definition, because why would we have two definitions of the same thing? It just causes more confusion and chaos. So hopefully that addresses your question.
Thinking more along the lines, like, it seems like you said that you guys don't really have a roadmap. You guys don't do road mapping as an internal team, because most of it seems like it's coming from requests from other teams, like, hey, we need this dashboard, we need this component. And so what I'm asking is more like, do you actually spend some time saying, hey, rather than just listening to these requests, you come up with something as a team or as a project manager?
Okay. Yeah, so we do have that, and it's more from what we care about as our business intelligence team. So we do work on things like platform changes. Right now, we're actually exploring different options. I don't know how much of this I can talk about, so I'm going to talk about it super generally. But different solutions that is going to better support our data warehouse. And this is an internal investment. So nothing that our customers really care about. They kind of do indirectly, because whatever we choose is going to allow them to get data faster. So they will kind of care about it, but they're not going to give us money for it. Because we've grown so rapidly too, I joined the company too many years ago, but it was closer to 8,000, and now we're 30,000. So there's a lot of growing pains that we've gone through, and we haven't been spending as much time thinking operationally, how can we better support our jobs? So we have both our development team and our operations team. And right now we support over 3,000 ETL jobs, and it's kind of crazy. So, and our team is not really structured in scale from an operations standpoint to address that. And so I'm actually working on a project to figure out how, based on who we have today, how can we do things better? Because clearly monitoring emails the way we're doing it right now is not going to last another 5 years. It'll probably just burst up in flames. So taking that time to actually look introspectively, and then we'll figure out what money we need to get this done. And yeah, so I do have that creative outlet too. Question?
So you build your requirements based on the requests, right?
Yes.
So what happens if, let's say, you have people in the team, like subject matter experts or developers, who have a better idea, and they feel like they're trying to influence your requirements, or they're trying to shift their scope or whatever. So how do you deal with that?
Oh, I think it's great to have anyone on the team share their input if they think that there's a better way of doing things. And we have those discussions, especially in our daily stand-ups and whenever we do requirements, knowledge transfer sessions. And if we think we came up with something that is different than what the business is asking for, or our internal stakeholders are asking for, and we think it's better, we'll communicate that. And we'll get, I always like to have the person who kind of come up with the idea too, or if the team came up with the idea, for the team to share it. But sometimes they don't really feel comfortable with that, and then I'll communicate to the stakeholder. So yeah, that absolutely happens.
It's possible, like it's shifting, the requirements can change.
Requirements shouldn't change in terms of scope, like what we call scope creep. But in terms of maybe we do find something based on the data where what the business may have expected, like let's say they think a certain data source is going to supply usage metrics, but we actually find something else that seems to be aligning more with what they want to track in terms of the usage. We'll let them know that. And maybe it comes back down to like, oh no, actually they wanted the original request, and that's fine. But if we feel like we found something that might be better, then we'll propose that, because it's better to ask early on than to come back later and kind of kick ourselves for not asking the question. Okay. Question and the, yeah.
So what phase in the development cycle do you usually see products?
Sorry, what was the question?
What phase in the development cycle do you get new projects assigned?
Oh, okay. What phase in the development cycle do we get new projects assigned? So the answer is it kind of depends. So we have a mixture of teams. So we have teams that are focused on year-long projects, and we have some teams that are focused on intaking requests for a particular business function, because there's a certain level of maintenance required. So early warning system, which is owned by our customer intelligence team, is one of those teams, because Salesforce acquires businesses all the time, and our products and clouds are growing all the time, and all of that usage across the products needs to be tracked. So we do have a team that is working. The team cycles through in terms of who's on it, but we are always intaking requirements. So I would say we always have a healthy backlog of requirements. So once we enter a development cycle of one scope of work, we are already working on the next scope of work. And sometimes too, the backlog will change as well. So let's say we already had 10 items, but then this 11th item comes and actually takes priority number 2. So that will happen, and we just negotiate. If we've already committed to some timeframes, we just renegotiate those based on the next highest priority. Because it doesn't make sense. It's just not possible to deliver everything when something new comes up. And the business, they try to push back sometimes, but it just doesn't make sense from a bandwidth perspective.
Two more questions.
Okay. Oh, wow, that went fast.
So can you talk about how there's an interview process for a product manager role, or different kind of questions we would ask, or what are you trying to find out from a potential person who is not a product manager but doing the transition?
Okay. Well, for product managers, at least on the IT team, I feel like everyone that we've worked with has some sort of product management experience. So it can be product management experience, can be leading an effort as kind of more in the project manager type of role, but where you're working with technical people or people who don't report to you, that you have to kind of corral together to deliver X product or solution or project or whatever it is within a certain time frame, and working with stakeholders internally to kind of who help you define what that goal is. I know product management interviews across different companies differ a lot. And if you're looking on the tech and product side, they will kind of test your UI, UX design skills. They will test you from a more technical skill perspective. And they may ask you to do kind of like one of those interviews where you actually have to do a proposal and kind of like prepare a presentation and that sort of stuff. because they want to test your interpersonal skills, because you're speaking in front of customers sometimes too. And I know Google's process is very, like they have books on Google's process. So it's very, very involved and a little stressful, I think, from what I've heard. But you know, on the IT side, it's different too, because I feel like if you do have to have some sense of knowing what the product line is that you're working on. If you have some exposure to reporting, data warehouse can make sense. If you have some exposure to, if you were, let's say, a Salesforce admin, then maybe our sales service and enablement team that does the internal sales and service cloud implementations, that might make sense for you. Yeah. And there was one other question on this side. Yeah.
So, I'm actually meeting with someone tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Good luck.
For interview. And I came from financial services.
Okay.
And going into the product role, and I've done like project management as well. But so I'm doing risk management right now. I worked in the IT space before, but now it's in the digital space.
Okay.
It's still in the same company.
Okay.
So do you have any advice on, I think you mentioned a little bit, but you know, I know the company, I know how to do the role, but the product is still going to be a little different now.
Okay.
It's still the bank, but it's
Yeah.
still digital though.
Okay, so let me play this back to you to make sure I understand the scenario. So you're applying for a different job within the same company, but it is a product manager role where previously you've had project management experience on the risk team?
Risk as well as like technical.
Okay. And then this digital team, what is the solution that's supported?
So it's digital banking, so they have like all these mobile devices.
Okay.
And like the product, like there are current products similar to that, like the product already exists, but now we're trying to make it better. So there's a digital strategy and there's a product, and the product already has been created.
So you're kind of like developing the mobile app or something like that? Okay. So I think in this situation, I mean, you obviously know what the bank represents and all that. So I don't think that that's going to be too much of a concern. But the ability to think from the perspective, the persona of who is using this app or whatever aspect of on the digital space that you would be responsible for in this role. So I think what would be great is for you to have experience working on that platform. So if it's the mobile banking application, to be really experienced with how it flows and to have been a user of it yourself. So to be able to highlight what you do like about it and what you don't like about it too, like where you think the end user experience could improve, and what you think is going to have the most benefit for the end user as well. And in this situation, it's hard to quantify what's going to be most beneficial, but I guess it's thinking about what is the most annoying for a customer and tackling that. Because I don't know that a customer would really move away from a bank because they hate the mobile platform. But you know, who knows, it's possible. But maybe they decide to, like, if they can't actually transfer money in and then they're, you know, that's going to be an annoying aspect too.
I went to coffee with him to ask him these questions. So I kind of did the interview.
That's also a good strategy.
But he asked these kind of questions.
Okay.
If you could make that better, what would you do? If you could like make a better feature, what would you do?
Yeah.
And luckily I used the app, so
good.
I knew like what I didn't like.
Yeah.
But I think someone asked a creative question of like, how could we make it better from our point of view as the head of digital? That kind of brings down the decision making. We don't, from what I understood, we don't get to say, hey, we want that to be this way. It comes down from the findings we've had. So there's no way of saying, hey, I would love the product to be this way, unless she comes down to us and says yes.
Yeah.
This is a major problem. We need to fix it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there is that scenario too where your leader does make decisions for the group, but the leader gets that input from somewhere, right? So where you do have an opportunity to influence, whether it's directly to the decision maker or through that management chain upward, There's always opportunity. So for the operations project that I'm working on right now, I kind of got it noticed because I had my business partner help me bubble it up as a concern. So a creative way to kind of get eyes on it, although it's kind of like one of those elephant in the room situations, like everyone knows it's a problem, but no one's really looking at it. So there's creative ways of getting attention that way as well. And being able to back what you think is also important too, to be able to speak really coherently about what is it that you want, what you think should change as a part of the platform, and why.
Use like analytics, like when you get all this data in Excel to kind of present it back.
Sometimes. So in the situation of the operations project, I have taken note of how many jobs have failed and what was the lead time, or what was the time duration did it take to even notice that it failed. I think that's a metric that helps prove that there's a problem. Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck.